You know, my favorite quote is the second half of Darwin. Everyone always remembers the first half of the quote, survival of the fittest. They forget the second half of the quote, for survival of the fittest and the most adaptable.
That's correct.
Right? And unfortunately, according to IRSA, 30% of our industry closed. That means the 70% of the operators who are still here, in my opinion, are most likely to have been the most adaptable.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Our guests today are the joint co-founders and CEOs of Boutique Fitness Solutions, a peer-to-peer networking and business education provider. The aim of BFS is to connect and educate boutique fitness owners to grow profitable businesses that meet the needs of their clients. Escape Fitness were excited to have been invited to the BFS event in New York that brought together some of the leading operators in the boutique fitness space, and over the next few weeks we'll be releasing a series of interviews that were recorded at the event. In this week's episode, we cover several topics, including the 5 business fundamental principles that they've identified to be critical for a studio to succeed in a post-pandemic world, the latest fitness industry data and what that means for operators, and how female CEOs have performed through the pandemic and why they are so optimistic about the future. So please welcome the co-founders and CEOs of Boutique Fitness Solution, Julian Barnes and NT Etuk.
Here we are, Times Square, New York City, the birthplace of boutique fitness, and we've got 2 of the best-looking gentlemen in town.
I see one.
You're a funny guy. So
Correct, he sees one.
he does. We are one day into a fabulous agenda. Now we want to get straight to the meat. We've brought in some key people in the industry. Tell us, state of the industry. What is going on? We've had 2 years off. I was last here in 2019. Yep. Here we are again in 22. We've had a big pause. There's been a lot that's changed. Why don't you give us the highlights of what's been happening in our fabulous industry?
All right. Well, this sounds like it's obvious, but the state of the industry is recovering. It truly is. We're in a place where things are looking up, but there's some serious headwinds, along the way. We're still, we like to believe that we're through the pandemic, but there's still things that are happening. We know that they might raise interest rates significantly, and so as a result of that, people are spending less. So on the consumer side, we're going to be seeing some of that. And, if you look at places like New York and California, you still have less than the number of people that you had pre-pandemic coming into studios. And so while things are looking up, things are getting better sort of month over month. Who knows when the next Omicron is going to come and all the rest of that. So it's recovering. There are definitely things to be positive and optimistic about, but there's still headwinds to be careful of.
Would you say that the coast, the LA, which we're from, and the New York, which you are from, are they lagging the rest of America?
No doubt.
No doubt.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because of work not being so downtown, like what's driving that?
A lot of factors. Let me add on to his answer. First of all, thank you for having us today, and thank you for being here.
He's so good at
this
that.
summit by
Thank
BFS.
you. He's so good at that.
The state of the industry is recovering, as NT said, and we've conducted 2 different surveys in the last couple months. One survey was of BFS members, and we asked them month by month for their numbers compared to the previous month, and Omicron stopped the recovery. But from February 14th on, every single BFS member who we surveyed has shown positive growth from February 14th on. So that's where we're headed. Unfortunately, as we learned in the same survey, 56% of the respondents are at less than 75% of their 2019 numbers. That's right. 56%. So we are on the right path up, but it's clear that as an industry, we have a long way to go to get back to 2019. And as NT mentioned, the headwinds are certainly a challenge, but the tailwinds are Exponential and F45 both reported massive growth in 2021. The beauty of having publicly traded companies in this industry, we now have access to better data, so they're reporting growth. Blink, Crunch, and Planet Fitness, which are not in our industry, have also reported growth. And there are related industries to us that are showing growth. So Live Nation, largest concert producer in the world, returned to profitability last year, showing that people are willing to get back for in-person experiences. American Express Travel reported that first quarter 2022 was up. Americans booked $120 million worth of travel first quarter this year. So we have tailwinds that people are ready to come back. People are coming back to the gym. They are coming back to studios. They are going to concerts. They are traveling. And we have headwinds. Inflation, interest rate, et cetera. So we expect that the industry will continue recovering as long as there's no additional variant that pauses the recovery, like Omicron paused the recovery this winter.
So just to jump in on that then, so is there another layer of complexity? So one of the things I have noticed with the boutique compared to some of the other brands that you mentioned, the larger brands, where there's probably bigger companies, a lot more infrastructure, experience maybe, capabilities. Do you think there's a difference between some of the smaller independents that could be instructors that are passionate about a particular modality, raise some money, open a great business, compared to probably very operationally excellent businesses that have all of these different processes dialed in, who can get straight back, understand where to focus, and probably weather the storm a little bit more than people who probably don't have as much business experience?
No doubt.
Huge difference.
No doubt.
Huge difference. First, just from an investment perspective, if you look at the companies that have taken an investment, those are the companies that have the ability to look beyond the horizon of the pandemic, right? So we saw F45 go public, we saw Exponential go public, we saw City Row taking the $12 million, et cetera. So those organizations that have their operational hats on, their brands are known, et cetera. We have, there's a group that has a $300 million investment to open 1,000 studios over the course of the next few years, right? And that is because they can look beyond, and they know that the underlying trends about people's interest in health and wellness is actually just continuing and increasing. The individual studio owner, especially the one that's still standing as opposed to just opened, number one, they're exhausted, right? So they've gone all the way through, and they're now at a place where they're like, well, I don't have my clients back. I don't have my staff because they left. My instructors are all over the world.
Competing against me.
That's right, they're competing, right? They're doing all of that sort of stuff. And now I have to go back to basics that I did like 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Number one, do I really want to do this? And number two, the days of what I call easy marketing and easy clients, like when ClassPass was really at the forefront, you're getting gym, like all of that sort of stuff is gone. People have to go back to client building basics, and it's hard. And they have no money to do it. So it's a different thing.
Let's label that. He just gave you our number one recommendation in the 2022 annual State of the Industry, which is to return to client building basics. And we say that.
That's how we roll.
We say that because our industry got complacent and lazy pre-COVID. Complacent and lazy and drunk off of easy money. What do I mean by that? You asked the LA New York question. Those are both dense cities, and New York is a street walking city. So pre-COVID, people could put up a sandwich board on the street, the sidewalks were packed, and people would walk in off the street, pull out their credit card, and purchase a 10-pack or a membership. Well, now people aren't working in offices. So that environment of just a natural market of people walking the street does not exist. What also doesn't exist, or another difference from 2019, is Apple Fitness wasn't as big as it is. Les Mills has grown. Peloton, Mirror, we mentioned City Row, and all the Fit Pros who now are doing their own thing online. There's just far more competition than ever before, which means that when we say return to business building basics, it means don't be so reliant on third-party platforms to drive traffic to your business. Those platforms, many of which are our partners, will acknowledge that their purpose is meant to be incremental revenue, not where you are dependent on them. So we're recommending that studio owners return to cultivating relationships directly with their clients. Know every business, every school, every nonprofit, every Little League team within a 10-block or 10-mile radius of your business. Engage with your community and expand out beyond that. You had some other thoughts on this.
I did, and actually it's one of our other recommendations, which is the underlying thing that's happening is that the consumer continues to be interested in health and wellness. That is continued, but the options are just many, many more, right? And so before, I used to go to this studio 3 days a week, and that was my fitness fix. That was my habit. I didn't even really want to change my habit. Then COVID forced my studio closed. There were the virtual stuff that was going on, but that wasn't quite as exciting as being in person, so I got the Peloton. And I went walking, and I went jogging with my friends. I started to do all of this stuff. And I like it. And now I'm going back, and I'm just not going to fit into the same box. So the consumers are actually different, these days. And that is one of the reasons why one of our recommendations is that you need to now start serving the whole consumer. If you think about health and wellness, then there's activity, there's nutrition, there's recovery.
And mindfulness.
And what studios and gyms did very, very well was the activity piece. Right. What we've seen now, and what we recommend, is that there is the option for them to actually start serving some of the other pieces as well, with partners that are out there that they can sort of tap into and do that. And if they start to do that, it offers more experience, more robust experience, and more revenue for them.
Especially at a time when we now know that the majority of the studios we surveyed are still below their 2019 numbers, which means they're looking for new revenue streams. And it's just, to us, it seems like an obvious fit. One of the ways back in the recovery is to expand your services so you are serving your clients' full needs. In other words, increase the amount of spend from your existing clients, as opposed to continually looking for new clients. We're not suggesting it's easy, which is why this year we've brought on 2 new partners, Eat Love and Drip Bar. Eat Love is a nutritional artificial intelligence platform that will help us make better eating decisions. Drip Bar is a fast-growing franchise with 117 locations that's providing IV drips, and they're small enough that they can fit inside an existing studio, so it becomes yet another ancillary revenue. But there are many others. Exhale just opened up their med spa with compression and cryotherapy and recovery and a bunch of other stuff. It's the way of the future, I think. Let me back up. One of the most important lessons I think our industry has learned during the pandemic is you have to have multiple revenue streams. And we, as an industry, primarily were delivering movement. Whatever the modality is, we were delivering movement.
And often just one type of movement,
one type of movement.
Like one hit, one
That's
row,
right.
one
That's
cycle,
right.
whatever it was. So, and then would you say, because just in speaking to some of the people at the conference here, some of the big boxes are looking at it different too, because what does boutique do really
Absolutely.
well? Absolutely focused.
Absolutely.
You do one thing really well, the customer journey is beautiful end to end. Now that we're opening up the big clubs who are also under pressure, I mean, lots of the brands you mentioned before are actually at the value-based end. So I would also throw in there from Europe, Basic Fit and Pure Gym, which are now showing up in the US as well. Much cheaper offering, fabulous facilities, pretty automated because they keep the head count down. So you've kind of got that. We've got Expo, Exponential, now spreading the club across the strip mall, right? So, and with the X-Pass, their version,
And they just partnered with Lululemon, to provide content. So the world has just changed unbelievably. And so you asked the question about the difference between the big box gym and the small independent operator. The small and even the best run independent operators are thinly staffed. Thinly, not poorly, thinly. They don't have more than 3 or 4, if they have 4 executives at their company level, they're doing well. And I mean executives, not including a studio manager, not including, if they have a marketing manager, an HR manager, a regional manager, that's usually it for a 3 to 5 location studio, not franchise, that's probably doing a couple million in revenue. They aren't staffed to absorb the myriad of not just challenges that emerged during the pandemic. They had to learn all this. They didn't have this, what's the word I'm looking for? This intellectual human capital wasn't already on
That's definitely
board.
not the word I thought you were looking for, but okay. No, I'm just saying, yeah.
They don't have this baked into their business. They don't have a whole team where they can say, go figure out how do we get online. It was the owner and the fitness manager figuring out how they get online, what software platform to use. It's challenging. That's why he said our community 25 months in, 26 months in, is exhausted. You know, the other thing, you know this better than the three of us, moms got beat over the head during COVID, and the boutique fitness industry is overwhelmingly owned by women 35 to 50 with young kids. So they were at home schooling their children while their partner was in the other room, and they were trying to teach a class live from the living room with the cat going across the yoga mat, and they're taking text messages from their employees who are all upset that they either were laid off or salaries reduced. And I'm not minimizing any of this. I'm saying that's a challenge that the executives at the larger businesses you mentioned didn't have. And that's part of the reason why the majority of our industry is exhausted, but optimistic, as you saw today from day one of the summit.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code DUMBBELL. That's escapefitness.com using the code DUMBBELL. That's it for me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview.
Yeah, there's a lot of the things that you've said there that I guess you don't appreciate, in particular the fact that our small businesses don't have those resources. And it's bad enough when you have got a big company and a lot of people around, even just to bounce ideas off, you know, and have a second opinion or someone to say, you know, to step out of what you're doing and look down and say, look, hang on a minute, you know, just take a step back. Is that a little bit about what you guys are trying to provide with a lot of these sort of independent entrepreneurs, is to be that sort of, you know, 10,000 foot view of what they're doing and kind of help direct them? Is that part of what you guys are trying to achieve?
That's exactly why we started the Mastermind program.
And not just the Mastermind program, but also just BFS in general.
Right.
Our goal when we came together was a solutions-oriented conference that started as a conference business that we knew we were going to eventually take it to trainings and ultimately media and all the rest of that. But a solutions-oriented conference that you could go to for a condensed period of time, one day, and walk away with specific things that you could implement. And we wanted it to be actually something that was quote unquote portable, because all of the big conferences were in California, and a lot of the folks from the Midwest and a lot of folks from the East Coast weren't going all the way over. So we were like, how do we help to spread some of the love, bring some of the people, you know, like you, and some of the knowledge, you know, all the way over to here. So that was the origin of BFS. We went along, we were doing the conference thing, and we were just starting to get into the trainings when, bang, COVID hits. And during COVID, studio owners were like, what do we do? And one of the things that we looked at was, you guys know YPO? So YPO has their forum concept where they have 8 to 10 people that get together, et cetera. We said mastermind groups can really help, you know, people to share knowledge and information and all the rest of that. And so that was one of the big things that we stood up during COVID, was 8 to 10 people that got together, and basically part of it was therapy, just group therapy, no question,
no doubt.
right? And part of it was just knowledge sharing. And wait, you use which vendors and which partners, and you use which practices, and how are you actually dealing with instructors wanting to leave and competing against you, and just the idea of community and sharing and knowing that you weren't alone, but also understanding how other people were doing it became a staple. And as we move forward, it's a big part of what we do.
It's collaborative learning. Again, back to your question about the difference in the big boxes and the independents. If you don't have that human capital management under roof, then a peer-to-peer group allows you to expand your access to that human capital management, and you don't have to try and figure out which of these virtual fitness platforms I'm going to use to keep my business going because I'm shut down. You now have peers who are similarly situated going through the same experience, and you can say, hey, Matt, hey, Emma, what are you guys doing for virtual fitness? What LMS platform are you using? How much are you contributing to your employees' 401k? Are you contributing to your employees' do you have a 401k? It's just they all want to know what everyone else is doing. And one of the most amazing things to have occurred during the pandemic is to see former rivals come together and be peers. We literally have some of the most prestigious brands in the boutique fitness industry, founders, former rivals on the same team, because as an industry, we all got humble. When you have to end up laying off 200 people in one day and you see your business go from X number of locations to 0, everyone ended up being at the same place. And it's stripped away all the pretense and it's okay, where do we go from here?
By the way, it's remarkable how many of these people at the top of the industry in the same city didn't know each other.
Correct.
They knew of each other, but hadn't actually met. But it comes to one of our other recommendations. One of the big things that everyone was talking about, and is still talking about right now, is instructors and talent.
Yep.
Yeah.
And how to deal with that. Like, during the pandemic, how do I deal with the fact that my instructors and my trainers are now my competitors? You know, is anyone doing non-competes or anything like, because they're competing with me right now, and they're taking my clients, and how do I deal with that? All the way through to, you know, now when they can't get them back. Right, they're like, well, you know, they're getting better paid in other places, or they just don't want to work as much anymore. They're just, and if you do get them, then they're like, well, I want to get paid more, and you're just like, well, what planet are you on? You know, so it's like that sort of thing where there's this interesting tension. And one of our messages to the studio owners, to the gym owners, is the diversity of opportunity that they have for sourcing talent at this point in time, and to diversify that base. So, you know, now, and many people are investing in training programs, so there are lots of people that are now coming back in and saying, hey, I'm interested in this space. They do have to train them up from the basics, but you're getting people that are fresh, you know, people that are excited, you know, about it, and that's sort of normal. But also go to like community groups like churches and other organizations like that they never would have thought of before, and then asking their existing clients and their existing instructors. So people are using referral basis a lot more as well.
And this came back in our session today. So we were building About Us Boutique, so we were very focused on how do we operationalise and how do we, you know, get that experience back in the studio. And there's a couple of things. First of all, the big resignation. So you had 1.5 million people leaving the fitness sector, but a whole lot of people going, I hate my corporate job. I'm going to go over to that wonderful industry of health and wellness.
Live a life of purpose.
Yeah. Second thing was everyone, whether you are older staff, whether you're brand new, everyone needs training or retraining.
That's right.
And then the third part to that, which came through very clearly, is don't be put off by training people from scratch. It's easier to train people from a blank sheet than it is to unlearn all the things from your past experience.
That's right.
And really set the new expectation together.
That's right.
So that came through powerful.
And so many people are jaded.
Oh my goodness.
Like they've come through and they're just like, oh my God.
They should have resigned.
Exactly.
And that's why today was the first time that we hosted in-person live training, 7-hour deep dives on sales operations, studio operations, and client experience. And each of the
taught one of those, right?
Emma taught one of those, and each of the 3 rooms was packed with people who recognized either they chose to be there so they can elevate their own skills, or their boss hired outside of the industry, hired a talented person and enrolled them for an immersion in the fitness industry and business basics. So that's why our mission has been and remains to educate, connect, and empower boutique fitness business owners, to educate them on business ops basics, to connect them with each other and resources that they can use to grow their business, and to empower all of them to be more successful.
And something else interesting that came out today, it was very obvious, was we talked about, you know, versus a big business that's perhaps got all the org structure and all the money versus the round tables and the colleagues that you're pulling alongside. it's actually more powerful because you've got more eyeballs with a broader perspective on the industry.
Yeah.
So when they come in, like even today, people were throwing around platforms. People came up with 20 different platforms.
Yeah.
If you were just working with one management team,
wouldn't
they're
know
only
that.
going to be looking at the
That's
5
right.
that they're all looking at.
That's
so
right.
not much more myopic. This is much more broad-reaching,
broader.
and the only thing we need to do today is to respond to our customer. So that comes down to innovation, the ability to trial and error and make better and do more of what they want and less of what they don't. That's
right.
the game we're in.
So here's the
That's right.
challenge
Yeah.
with that. To me, so many people are looking for the next new thing to build their business. And in my personal opinion, it's not a new thing. It's return to business fundamentals, which, look, our industry is very young. You could argue that it started with batteries in '99, SoulCycle in '06, accelerated it, and then it just took off in 2013. So the vast majority of people in our industry never worked in this industry during a downturn. And so we just, as an industry, went straight to home without touching first, second, and third base. And so you're saying innovate, and we're saying let's go back and learn how to get to first base, get to second base, get to third base. Bad analogy probably for this audience, but let's learn the business basics before we worry so much about innovating. Innovation is going to happen on the fitness programming side, absolutely. But on the business ops side, I don't think the fundamentals of running a business have changed. In fact, I would argue it's even more important to return to the fundamentals on the back of house. But front of house, absolutely. Continue innovating, client experience, all that.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I also think just taking a part of my course and adding it to the basics is kind of the secret. That's where we got to today, at least anyway it was. Let's come in at the process, understand who we are. Like, so we talked a lot today about brand. You know, who are we? How do we differentiate? How do we turn up in the world? And it's got to make our hearts sing. So take that into the operations, and by just running that through the same process, the business basics, but doing it through my lens, the flavour of my brand, is enough to make it feel exciting and new, to get all the staff on board. So the way you greet people at the front desk might be different to the way NT does, but it's a solid system that we've operationalised. But it's got a different flavour. Are you friendly? Are you cool? Are you VIP? Are you bring a friend? Are you wide church? So that's where the excitement is, but it's basics.
You just talked about something that one of our keynote speakers, Sadie Lincoln, talked about, which is the founder of Bar 3, talks about the sandbox. And the sandbox for her 176 franchisees are 5 guiding principles that they need to stay within the sandbox. But within the sandbox, they can do whatever they want, be as innovative as they want, as long as they're staying in the sandbox. So yes, you, me, Matt, and T may greet at 4 different locations, may greet our clients differently, but we're all gonna greet them within the Bar 3 principles sandbox. I think that's what you're talking about. That level of flexibility with guidelines. It's almost like parenting someone.
It is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so with that, then just before we started the interview, you said that you've identified some key principles, or however the name for them. Recommendations.
Yeah. 3 of which we've already done.
So give us a summary of those. Well, first thing, one is, do you see then that these principles are things that maybe the traditional businesses, big brands, etc., have probably figured out, like your business basics, and then the new boutique space, these are things that they probably need to bring over, or are they things that are just unique to the boutique space?
I think it's unique to the time. To the time.
Okay.
I'll run through the 5 and then we'll go through them.
Yeah.
Number 1, we already said, return to business building basics. Number 2 is identify varied sources of talent for your team. Number 3, build an omni-channel business. Number 4, have multiple sources of revenue. And number 5, we didn't talk about.
Be resilient.
Continue. Well, you know, my favorite quote is the second half of Darwin. Everyone always remembers the first half of the quote, survival of the fittest. They forget the second half of the quote, survival of the fittest and the most adaptable.
That's correct.
Right? And unfortunately, according to IRSA, 30% of our industry closed. That means the 70% of the operators who are still here in my opinion, are most likely to have been the most adaptable. And NT has had a great
couple of different examples.
Personal experience in the last couple of months on this.
Well, not just a couple of months, but since COVID, right? So what I do also is I started a company named FitGrid, which is a technology company in this space, and we provide a community engagement platform for studios that helps to increase retention. And when the pandemic came, at the very, very beginning, we were fortunate. I saw it. We saw it coming. And we basically turned around a solution that took studio schedules and matched it with opening Zoom meetings in 3 days and got that up and running and had like a whole bunch of people that came on. And we were working from like 5 a.m. to midnight, like every day, just crushing. And it was really, really difficult. But what I said to my team, at the time, I said a couple of things. The first thing is, this thing is coming, and the team didn't believe it, because in America, they didn't believe it was coming. I was like, this thing is coming, and it's gonna swamp us, and it's going to crush this industry. And we are a nice-to-have piece of software at the time. We were nice to have, right? But everyone's going to be like gone, right? Until we figure it out. So we have to switch all the things that we're currently working on and work on this solution that I had mapped out. And everyone's like, ah, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, listen.
Adapt or die.
Adapt or die. 3 days, we got it out, and we had the big guys coming to us and saying, we're not gonna be ready for like 8 months, 9 months. Can you please put your clients on? So adapt or die. And in that process, people had to learn, how do you motivate people when they're that exhausted? So that was number one. And I was like, listen, guys, the reason we're doing this is we are no longer producing code, we're producing hope for an entire industry. So the mission became something different. Then we got hit again, right? And this is what Julian's referring to in the last couple of months. The majority of our developers, 18 of our developers, are in Ukraine. And so not only like did COVID, and we're exhausted as a company and a team, coming out of COVID, and then you got this thing happen, and devastating, emotionally, psychologically, just on a pure human level, devastating. And, it was like whatever other problems we had, we need to focus on saving lives. And we established safe houses, and I was personally like on signal with each one of our 18 folks, making sure they could move through the country. Like, here's what I'm seeing on the news, can you do this and do that and all the rest of that? And it was just this crazy time period. And you had the folks that were there and going through it, and it was heart-wrenching what they were going through. Then you had the folks over here that were also going through something where they were just like, I don't know what to do. Helplessness, particularly those who had family there or who had become really close. What can I do? How can I help? At the same time as you're also dealing with psychologically, is this the end of the company? Like, how does this work? It's our entire development team, et cetera. And you know what? I promised everybody, I was like, no, everyone over here, focus, because the best thing we can do to help everyone over there is crush it. So just focus on what you can do. And everyone over here, we're here for you. What do you need? And it is remarkable. People can adjust to anything in the human condition. The guys in Ukraine were just like, hey, is it okay if I take like 2 days? Because, and you're just sort of like, seriously, like, you're amazing. Like, save your family.
Right.
Like, go do that. We will figure everything else out. Adaptability, resilience, we got through it. I mean, there's still obviously a lot that's going on there, but we're back, we're bigger and badder than ever.
Part of that there must be a leadership in there. I interviewed Bedros, who's I guess he's kind of a boutique owner, and he was telling me that he was trying to think when he was going through this what to sell, because all the gyms were closed, he didn't have a digital offering, and he had to inspire and motivate. And he said that one of the things he had to do is to sell hope. That was
exactly
his
right.
primary thing.
That's
He's like,
exactly
okay,
right.
Because no one else knew what to do,
Yep.
and they needed someone to give him that.
Exactly right.
And I suppose, leadership, particularly in some of these studios, it must be a big part of it as well. Who do you, as a studio owner, go to for that?
That's exactly
And
right.
that's why they're, again, mostly women owners are exhausted because they had the burden of saving their families, saving their work family, trying to figure out this whole PPP thing, negotiating with landlords, just a whole slew of challenges that they never signed up for when they opened their yoga, bar, Pilates studio. They were just thinking about modality, instructors, and basics. Now they're dealing with finance with the PPP, landlord renegotiations, business models changing, virtual fitness, just a whole slew of challenges, which is why it's always been said that women are the strongest creatures on earth because they were able to lead their industry through this mess, and that's through this pandemic.
And in fact, I led a session on leadership at our CEO Summit this morning, at the very, very first thing. And one of the first things that I said was, turn to the person next to you and give them a fist bump. You're still here.
Exactly.
You made
exactly.
it, right? And given the 30% disappeared, that is remarkable. And what I want to do in this session is let's go through a checklist, a self-check-in, on just how incredible you have become. Because so many of these studio owners at the very beginning, early pre-pandemic, and I'm talking about like the badasses of the industry, right? You talk to them about who they were and they would tell you, I'm a people pleaser. I'm like, you're a what? Like, your studio is like this and like this, there's no people pleasing in you. Like, there's just like, you just knock it out. Like, no, we're people pleasing. And their journey through the pandemic.
Tell them the story of the one member who showed up in the meeting that day.
Yeah.
She was always dressed to the nines, but in one meeting.
Yeah. So we have one member who will remain unnamed, right? This is what happened. 130 people at the height, 130 staff members at the height. And she showed up to one of the mastermind meetings that I was moderating. And for the first time in any time that I've known her, there was a hair out of place. And I was just like, what's going on? Like, because this does not happen. And she was like, I just had to finish doing all of my P&Ls and the accounting and all the rest. And she's like, I haven't done that in like 10 years.
And she also said, I'm in wartime CEO mode.
Wartime CEO.
We went from CEO, boss of the business, to adapting to wartime CEO, to now some of them are figuring out.
Not only the president, I'm also the janitor. I'm doing everything.
But we're talking about the 70% who survived. Even if they're underwater, they survived because they adapted. Out of necessity. They figured this stuff out. And because there's just so much being thrown at them every day, I think the point of your presentation was for them to acknowledge all the growth they've made as a leader during the process. And that's one of the reasons why we said the state of the industry is recovering, but we're headed in the right direction. Our other keynote speaker was Jay Galuzzo from Club Sports Group, and we specifically invited Jay because, as you know, probably Jay was one of the co-founders of Flywheel. Then he was a managing director at North Castle, and he recently came out of retirement in North Castle to start Club Sports Group, which is committed to opening 300 locations of F-45s. And the question that we asked him, actually you asked him on stage, was, given what looks like a mess, the 30% closures, the staffing challenges, all the other challenges we've talked about, why is Jay so optimistic about the future of the industry that he's made a commitment to opening 300 locations? And it kind of just hit me now, based on what we were just saying. The surviving leaders of this industry have grown so much during this process. Their leadership capacity has grown. Once they now bring all of that to bear in moving their companies forward in a non-pandemic environment whenever we get there, that's reason for optimism for this community. They've gone through they have their pandemic MBAs.
Yeah, they do. And the pie got bigger, right? So fitness has gone to health. We kind of know that. We also know that there's 30% of our studios probably need backfilling. You know, people have got displaced and, you know, some people are doing other things now. We know that, but the pie's got bigger. And I think
Correct, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the event itself now. I've just heard wonderful things in the corridor. There's some things, when you have an event, and how many people do you expect through the 2 days?
450, 500.
So that is a tremendous...
Of decision makers.
Decision makers.
Owners, managers, executives, investors,
People who write
suppliers,
checks and,
correct.
well-
Yeah, we like to say we're not like the regular party. We're the VIP event.
Correct.
Right.
We're behind the velvet rope.
We're never going to
Yeah.
be a 3, 4, 5,000 event. That's not our
Don't
intent.
even want to be that.
No, absolutely. So that's one thing, is that it's intimate. I feel like I know most people by name. I had 30 people in our masterclass today, which was fantastic, enough to share a lot of ideas, but small enough that we got everyone around the room, so it was really that nice mix. People are very, very, very excited about the one-on-one coaching sessions.
Yep.
So they're being teamed with who?
So we have 16 coaches who are subject matter experts in sales, marketing, operations, talent management, buying and selling a business, finance, and I'm sure I'm forgetting something. And our attendees can have 25-minute meetings with those coaches, and they've already sent the coaches their challenges. So that 25 minutes is basically speed dating in a speed coaching for 25 minutes. I have problem X, great. Here's some things for you to think about, boom. So it's always been one of the more popular aspects of the summit. I want to mention one other thing that we believe differentiates the Summit by BFS from anything else out there in our industry is the fact that we are the only summit where the entire industry is welcome, regardless of the software you use, regardless of the modality you use, whether you're a franchisee of a particular company. All of them are welcome and actually come here today. So that's what makes us very unique. We're open to the entire industry.
Yeah, that's good. You also seem to have struck the right balance between learning and then socialising, because we know it's like the shower moment. So much drops in those, you know, we've had a wine and we're just actually talking, and a lot of people are sort of switching a lot of ideas in that. There's cocktail hours, there's dinners, like there's New York City, you know, it's just one of those wonderful idea generating
Would you call
environments.
that the shower moment?
She
Well,
did.
you know what I mean. Okay, that came out way wrong. I mean, I'm not sitting there learning. Typical boys.
You know, how's it going
Yeah.
over there?
I do know what you mean. I do have a shower moment every now and then.
Some of us might call it the runner's high. You
Yeah,
know,
okay, sorry.
moving meditation. No, but seriously, what you're referring to is our belief in collaborative learning. We said our mission is educate. We didn't say that the education has to be one way, us to them. The education occurs just as much in those intimate events, and that's why we have multiple formats. So you talked about the one-on-one coaching. We had formal instruction today. We'll have general presentations on day 2, and then we have the private dinners. The learning occurs from each other as much as it occurs from any of the formal speakers. That's why the intimacy is so important.
Yeah. And then what would you say, so we were together in 2019, I came in for this, and I did a sort of a different session. What have been the big shifts? I mean, we've obviously got the industry shifts, but what have we seen difference in terms of just anything about the conference? Are the same people turning up? What are the big movements?
The biggest difference is what happened today,
Right.
day 1. We stripped away the breakout sessions, so there are no breakout sessions. Everyone stays in the general sessions for the fireside chats, the panel discussions. We created a second day, which we were concerned about doing, because the reason we always kept this a one-day event was because we knew we're serving working moms who can't do 2- and 3-day events away from their family. But the way we structured it this time, day 1 is the trainings. The training that you led, the training that I led on sales ops, and the other training we had on studio ops. And so what we've seen is that many of the people in those trainings are the managers. And many of those managers may not come back tomorrow. So we've had 2 days, but it's day 1 for formal instruction, how to run a studio. Day 2 is open to the entire industry for what we would generally consider the typical conference format: state of the industry, fireside chats, presentations. So, and in 2019, we didn't have one-on-one coaching.
No,
we didn't. Right.
No.
So we had it in DC and Chicago. That's the other big takeaway. We were foolish enough to do this in multiple cities pre-COVID. That's not happening anymore. It's here. It's New York. It's our home. It's the home of the boutique fitness industry, and it's the type of event where people have traveled here from Mexico City.
Are you inviting international people as well?
Of course. They're always there. They're always there. Actually, I think our first one, we had someone from Switzerland.
We did. I'm sure we had more people interact with 20 different countries represented in 2019 in a pre-COVID world. But this year, I know we have Peru, Mexico, Calgary, Seattle, California.
I like you did that. Peru, Mexico, I'm like, okay. That's the same country, right?
Peru.
No, Peru,
California.
Mexico,
Calgary. I'm talking about people traveling here.
Yeah, fair enough.
People are traveling here, which is the point.
I would say that there's one other big thing that's been different. Now, all of that is sort of structural about the conference itself, but actually just as a larger thing, our credibility is much different now than it was. 2018, we sort of came in and folks like, who are these guys?
Who are
these guys, right?
So who are you? Like, how did you sort of like become the people that would be qualified, and no disrespect to this, but to run this type of event? You know, what's your background?
Sometimes it takes outsiders to move an industry. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just say as far as that, my first company that I actually ran, that I actually started was an educational video game company. And as I was getting my first investors, they were like, but you're not an educator, and you're not a game programmer. You know, why should I give you money? And it's like, because you're my mom. You know, like, it was like that sort of thing. Okay. So my background is actually, I'm a tech entrepreneur. So I actually, when I was growing up, I was Oracle. I taught myself 6 programming languages at the age of 11. And I came to America to find my wife. No, I came to the States for boarding school, and then I studied actually electrical engineering. Then I got an MBA. I went through the journey of like corporate.
Okay, so we're feeling really average right now, but keep going.
How did you find your wife?
Right, exactly. That is another story.
That is a whole
other thing. But no, I actually did the thing where, you know, I worked as a banker at Citigroup, and I worked with McKinsey as a consultant, and started my first company, which was educational video games. It ended up raising about $25 million for it, and did that. And then came into the fitness space. And coming into the fitness space, really saw the opportunity because I started FitGrid first. That was a community engagement. And that was because fitness was all about people, and you're more likely to go back to the studio the more connected you are to the other people, right? And I saw that in my first Pilates class. Right, and so we're like, okay, how do we create a system that connects everyone together and introduces them and increases retention acquisition because you're bringing all these folks together. And then as I was doing that, I was reading Mark Benioff's book. Mark Benioff started Salesforce, and he talked about how they had these city tours that they would do, right? And so they would go to different cities and they would have little confabs, little get-togethers with existing clients and new clients. I was like, I should do something like that. But I knew the event space, and I was just like, ugh. But it's so much work, and it's so challenging, and so small margins, and all the rest of that sort of thing. And I was just like, okay, we'll put that on the back burner. And then met this guy. Well, actually, we already knew each other because he was working on.
So we've known each other for years, but let me just give my backstory. While he entered the industry in 2012?
2013. 2014, yeah.
I literally grew up in the fitness industry. My mom was a volunteer at the YWCA in White Plains, New York. So I was age 6, the only male on campus when she was volunteering, and I was probably playing with coloring books at age 6. I didn't know what she was doing, but fast forward a decade later, and she was the chairwoman of the board of the YWCA of Central Westchester. So I grew up around.
Say that 3 times fast.
Central Westchester.
That's right. Exactly.
So I've grown up around the dinner conversations of client acquisitions, client retention, programming. How do we get people to move? Literally, for my entire life, those have been the dinner conversations. And fast forward, you know, Tufts, law degree, Chapel Hill, and 20 years of working with entrepreneurs, Madison Square Garden's been a client on sports sponsorship stuff. I created New York University's Institute in Entrepreneurship and Small Business Management. And when he and I met, I had a company called Body Local that was producing networking events for fitness and wellness professionals in New York City. So I've been around the business of sports and fitness my entire life. So while I may not have grown up in the boutique fitness movement industry, and I'm not a pioneer like Ruth Zuckerman and Joe Daly and some of those, what we brought to this space was a recognition that 2017, it was the fastest growing industry of the fitness industry, and it wasn't being properly serviced in a way that was unique to their needs. You can't talk about client acquisition for a gym that has a $35 membership in the same way that you do for a studio that has a $35 class. And what we saw in the marketplace was other people having that conversation about client acquisition, bringing everybody into the room. There's a time and place for everyone to be in the room, but when we're having that conversation, it needs to be very specific to how does a boutique fitness business engage in client acquisition, nurture their leads, et cetera. So that's why we started this, and that's how my professional and life experience, his professional experience, our mutual interest in helping people live healthier lives, and our desire to build systems for business owners that allow them to run their business better so the business owner, the studio owner, can deliver their innovative programming. That's why we do what we do, to help them stay in business so they can help their clients.
Yeah, none of which anyone knew in 2018. So they're like, who are you?
Right,
And
right.
going back to that credibility thing, what then happened, actually I think particularly through COVID, was we demonstrated that we were there for people.
Absolutely.
Like we put out so much information on how do you get through, and the mastermind groups and the training sessions, and for us, it was really just a service to the industry.
Videos, playbooks,
And,
thanks to Emma.
Yeah.
Remember that story where I was having so many conversations with studio owners who were ready to let go of the rope.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember calling Emma on a drive up to Connecticut, and I said, hey, our community needs an inspiration. This is when you were dropping your badass bullets from your
On the daily,
from your
from
bicycle
the front,
while you were
yeah.
sweating at 2 a.m. I said, can you share some of that with our community, because they were literally on the edge. And I'm pleased to say some of those people are here. Some of those people who were on the ledge in 2020 are here this weekend, thanks to you and the other people who contributed to the content that we created and distributed to the whole community.
Matthew and I are finding that as we interview people around the planet as well, as hard as it was, and often people have never worked harder for a smaller amount of money during the
Absolutely.
pandemic. Yes. But those that did and showed up, it's come back.
It's come back.
And we talk about the 56%, and that's a scary stat. But the people who managed to hold their community together. And also what we're seeing in brick and mortar businesses is because you have an actual community in the real world, where people that show up for each other and text each other when they're not there and things like that, that is beginning to come back. We've heard the McKinsey projections. When do you think we will, considering we don't go into another lockdown or whatever, when do you think we will recover realistically? I hear a range of dates.
Before we answer that, I'm going to add some more numbers just so we have full context.
Okay.
22% are doing better than they were in 2019,
Right.
and 10% are at the same level as 20. So they're not worse. They got back to even, and 10% weren't even open. So if you take
Such a mix.
right, so 56% is below 75%, but 22% is doing better,
Right.
and 10% or 11% are exactly where they were.
Do you have any optics on why, or is it kind of all over the place?
It's landlords,
Right.
local municipalities, region of the country, modality, innovation. We have a member who ran an outdoor cycling studio pop-up in New York City through the winter for 18 months. Talk about the level of innovation required to
Through
figure
winter. Let's just say that again.
I just
Through
walked
winter.
down
New
the
York,
street
through
yesterday
winter.
and I can
through winter.
hats off to them.
No bathrooms, no showers, no amenities, took an outdoor lot, put in
No
2020.
feeling in your feet. I mean,
But now, I think next week, She's about to open a new space that is a combination of strength training and cycling, and her community likes the outdoor cycling, so the new space will be an outdoor deck with a cover over it in case of inclement weather, and she would never have thought that would be in her future pre-pandemic. Yet another example of adaptability, perseverance, strength. So your question, when are we gonna recover? Do you know? If you know, tell me.
I mean, look, your guess is as good as ours, but what I think we can say is we have gotten used to the idea of variance. And so consumers are less concerned about it. And we're in a country where, generally speaking, it's not like the zero COVID tolerance policy that you have in China, where they're going to shut down an entire city because you have X number of cases, right? And so as a result of that, I see people being concerned a lot less because vaccinations and boosters and all the rest that had that effect. People are absorbing the information that, you can get COVID and not get hospitalized or deathly sick. And so I think that sentiment is starting to come back. So you have two aspects. You have one aspect, when does the business environment improve enough, right, so that you're back? And the second is, when does the consumer sentiment? Now remember, the consumer sentiment has two parts of it. The first part is, do I feel like going out and being around people and doing all this sort of stuff? And the second part is, do I feel like going back and doing the exact same thing I was doing before? And remember that doing the exact same thing, nobody's doing that anymore, right? They have different options. And so there's a good 20-30% of people that were in the studios previously that they now have to fill again, particularly in places like New York and California. And those new people are out there, but they need to come back. So I would say that probably by the beginning of 2023, yeah, we'll probably be in a place where we're seeing everything, back roughly.
And the challenge, and that is because the answer to your question is ultimately unknown, is why one of our 5 recommendations was build an omni-channel business. Because in New York City, here's the reality.
You want to be shock-proof.
When Omicron hit in middle of December to basically February 14th, the city didn't officially shut down, but it unofficially shut down. The consumer, we're at
Same result, right? People didn't go.
I don't think we're gonna see governors and mayors want to take the heat again to shut a business down, but consumers made the decision. Yeah. And so that's certainly possible in the fall of 2022. No one knows, but if you know that that's a possibility, you can plan for it by building an omni-channel business or building a business with multiple revenue streams. We even had one member say to me, it was intelligent. I hadn't heard it before. I hadn't thought about it. And I asked him his biggest takeaway from running a studio during the pandemic. He said, multiple revenue streams for me means revenue in another state. Where not just multiple revenue under one roof, but he never imagined that the governor of a state could force him to close his business, and he never wants to be in that situation again. And I'm not suggesting that everyone go do that. I'm suggesting we know it's possible that there may be a surge in the fall of 2022 or the winter 2022-23. It's possible. But unlike the last 2 years, we have more business tools available to us, so we don't need to be caught by surprise if it happens again.
So tell us about next year then. Like, it's obviously it's still fairly exclusive, and I'm only just learning about this. But if anyone's listening to this and they feel as though this is something for them, how would they get involved? Who is it open to? When is it on? When is it being presented next?
You go.
Next year is our 5th anniversary.
Ooh, 5 years.
But if you're listening to this, you don't have to wait till next year. What I like to make sure prospective partners and other studio owners understand about BFS is that as amazing as these 2 days are, this is not our core business. Our mission to educate, connect, and empower studio owners is something that we execute on that mission every day of the year. So if there's a studio out there that
376 days.
Pretty much.
Even though there are only 365.
So if there's a studio out there that wants to join.
I'm like, this was an MBA. Like.
You saw it?
So we have programs that serve every member of the boutique fitness ecosystem, so they don't need to wait until April 2023. They can visit Boutique Fitness Solutions. They can find us both on LinkedIn or Instagram, support@boutiquefitnesssolutions.com. Get in touch with us and we'll figure out which of our programs is suitable for you at this juncture of your business today. You don't need to wait to 2023.
And in fact, you shouldn't. I mean,
Yeah,
the
you
reality is that
The work's done every week.
Yeah, that's right. And what the biggest thing that I took away watching people over the course of the pandemic is so many studio owners try to reinvent the wheel and go it alone. And if there's a message to your audience that we would give is you don't have to.
Correct.
You're not alone. The challenges that you're facing and the loneliness that you feel, other people are feeling that as well. And you don't need to feel that. So get involved, come and join us, because our goal is putting people together so you don't feel that anymore and you don't feel that again, because it's really not necessary. And I found this industry fascinating at the beginning when I first came into it. I was like, I don't understand if AOL and Google can do a deal, right? Like back in the day, I'm dating myself, right? But AOL and then Google can do a deal. Why is it that this studio can't work with this studio? I mean, I'm like, how is this possible? And the pandemic forced people to really do that. Except that what I found was that they only did it when they were brought together in environments that allowed it to happen. And that's what we provide. Because otherwise, people still felt like they were doing it alone because they didn't have a place to connect. So we're the place to come connect. Come chill with us.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and there are worse places to hang out than New York.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And even online. We call it online New York, you know? Come hang out.
Well, look, thanks again. Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
inviting us
Thank
down.
you. This was great. How do I get a
Thank you.
sexy accent like you two? That's what I'm talking
Teach
about.
you. We'll do an
feel like I need to
event on
shake
that.
your hands.
We get hot hair. Look at
Or
this.
maybe around the bar later we can.
Can I try around the bar later?
Around the bar later.
Around the Barbie?
Fantastic.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.